So today I'm sat down with Alka, Sehgal, Cuthbert. Thank you for your time. Author of The Dangers of the New Anti-Racism.
That's right. Yeah.
So just to begin with, I like to get a bit of background about my guests. So can you tell me a little bit about your early life, where you grew up, and the experiences that have shaped the worldview that you've got now? That's a bit of a loaded one.
I'll give it a go, and thank
Please.
you for asking me to come and have this conversation, Dean.
No problem, thank you.
That's lovely. So I'm 63. I was born in India, and Mum and Dad came over to Britain in the early 60s, where they lived in the East End of London, Bethnal Green and Stoke Newington. So I consider myself a Londoner, even though I don't think I could live in London at the moment. I will always feel that I'm a Londoner, I think.
Why don't you feel you could live in London at the minute?
I just find it too tiring, whether that's because I'm getting old or whether it's, I just find the adverts on the Underground really annoying.
All the hustle bustle, would you say? A bit too much?
Sometimes I like the hustle bustle, but most of the time, I suppose, with getting a bit older and slower, I don't. I can't bear the Sadiq Khanisms all over the place, the posters that treat you like you're a toddler. I can't bear the...
That's a new one, Sadiq Khanisms. I might have to steal that. That's a great one.
The kind of pain of trying to find somewhere to park if you're a driver in London. It's just that... Anyway, I don't want to go whinge on and on about that. So anyway, I'm a Londoner. So Mum and Dad came over. They were lax Hindus. They weren't particularly religious. Dad was a teacher. Mum didn't really have a career, and they came over at the behest of the British government at that time, who required math teachers.
Right, okay.
So in that sense, a really formative thing that I remember running through my childhood was this ability to have two kinds of views at the same time, which was, Mum and Dad felt a fondness for India. They did not like the fact that Britain had colonised India,
right?
But they were very proud of Indian independence. But they, especially my dad, loved Britain, and he said there is no place where you can be treated as an equal in the way that you can in Britain. And he experienced that through his career, really, not only through his career as a maths teacher, but as he progressed, which you could in those days, to become head of department, and obviously, he won the pools and got his first car. He was awfully proud of that. And then eventually they moved out of the East End into the more suburban parts of Hymes Park, which was largely where I went to school as a kid. And he stood for local Labour councillor back in the 70s.
When Labour was still
MP
Labour.
rather, when Labour was, or well before Blair, yes. And he said to me, there's no other country in the world where an immigrant can come and stand for political office without having to pay a whackload of bribes to people. So just remember that. And so I had this. That was just something I kind of grew up with. That you could have there were contradictory views. Could be.
Two things can be true at the same time.
Yes, and it's really where you choose to put the significance. We have that choice. It's not a fact of nature, is it? These are judgments and values and personal feelings and all sorts of things involved, but we can choose. So I grew up fairly normal, lower middle class upbringing. All my dearest school friends were white English, lived down the road from me. I was one of about 2 or 3 brown-skinned kids at my local school, and I had, there were racist incidents, but they were the isolated exceptions to my experience. They didn't define They were not part of my everyday life.
Right.
That's not to say other people haven't had different experiences.
No, but this is your experience.
Yeah, and there's class involved, there's familiarity with British culture, there's, I'm not very dark-skinned. Maybe if I was really, really dark-skinned, there might be more, who knows, but, so my experience was, yes, there was racism, but more importantly, there was friendship and there was acceptance. A very easy, unspoken one, not forced. It was very tolerant in a quiet way. So, for example,
was it better? Sorry, just to interject slightly. Would you say the tolerance levels were better then than they are now? Because I've heard people say, and you read it online and things like, it feels a bit more forced these days. Like you have to accept it.
Yes, it's much more codified, and people are much more self-conscious about what they say and how they interact with people, which I think is a tragedy and quite dangerous for social solidarity and, improving things for everybody, really. So one formative thing which Mum and Dad told me, I don't know when they told me really, I can't remember, but I must have been old enough to understand it, was that when they bought their house in the suburbs, the neighbours had all told the sellers, do not sell your house to the packies, basically. It was, like I said, a mainly white area. And however, the people selling the house, that just made them more determined to sell it to Mum and Dad. And Mum and Dad knew this, so they were a bit kind of intrepid and just kind of kept themselves to themselves. But Mum was pregnant, and when she had my sister, although they'd moved into a nicer house, a nicer area, it was they still didn't have carpet or anything like that, or washing machines. So Mum was out fairly soon after having had my sister, hanging out nappies that she'd washed by hand.
Right.
And the neighbour saw her and said, "What are you doing? I thought you just had a baby." Mum said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, what if you should be resting." And Mum said, "Well, I've got to wash the nappies." And she said, "You hand wash them?" And Mum said, "Yes." She said, "Give them over to me. I'll put them in the washing machine. I've got a washing machine." And so this was a neighbour that had told this seller not to sell to Mum and Dad.
And yet it's been really kind.
And yeah, exactly. There was, the practicalities of living side by side won the day. And it's not like they became great close friends, but, it was friendly. Neighbourly. Yeah, exactly.
So, daughter of migrants. What is your view at the moment of the migrant situation? As someone who came from, I think the term, and pardon me if this is wrong, like migrant stock.
Yeah, no, I don't mind, that's okay. Yeah, I'm not offended by that. So.
As you said, everyone's careful about how they say things now. So.
Thank you for your care, but it's fine. I think, and this is partly why I was very grateful to be asked to write the pamphlet you referred to, The Dangers of New Anti-Racism.
Yeah.
I felt that something really important had changed in the political and social culture, where it was no longer a case of immigrants or migrants expected to join in British life, in habits and norms, but rather our presence in this country was being weaponised to attack and demonise white culture, British majority. I think the whiteness is a historic accident. I think it's the fact that it's anti-majoritarian, it's anti-democratic, and it's an elite project. Now, at first, it took me quite a while. I think I've only recently really come to see just how wrong-headed multiculturalism was, because for quite a while it was, well, it's a nice idea, but it's just gone a bit too far, or, it's gone in the wrong direction, or like a glitch in application rather than fundamentally wrong. Yeah. But I actually think it's fundamentally wrong because it boxes us off from the start, and it overemphasises kind of cultural attributes. It's almost as if there were genetic DNA, if you are this ethnicity, you will ever more be so, and there's no chance. So you don't want to integrate, and we don't care if you integrate, or we don't. It just doesn't allow for the possibility that yes, culture is important, but there are shared characteristics. Culture is more malleable. It's not fixed, and more important than that, we have a common humanity. And if we don't start from the common humanity, we will always end up in a bad place socially.
No, it does seem like that, and we've had obviously clashes and things like that. And I think from speaking to people at migrant hotel protests, for example, people don't care if people come here legally. It's the illegal side. That's why the protests have kicked off in the way they have. Obviously, you're always going to get a percentage who are there just to cause drama. Yeah. But I've been to 2 of the local protests.
Right.
And
These ones in Dis?
No, I didn't go to Dis. I went to the ones in Norwich.
Oh, Bothwell. Right,
yeah, Bothwell. I interviewed Glenn, the organiser. I've spoken to many of the people there, a lot off camera. I've got sound bites and things. Nobody cares about the fact that they're migrants. It's the illegality of how they came to the UK. And there's been an upsurge in that area of criminality. That's what people are upset about.
Right.
And there's not families in the hotel either. I think it's all... When I went down there, just drove past the other night, it was all young men that I could see. So I kind of understand that. Now, just moving on to the dangers of the new anti-racism. What was the inspiration behind writing?
Well, I was invited by the Academy of Ideas and Baroness Fox to speak at the Academy that year, and I was very keen to do so because I was feeling really angry at the way the public discussion was going post George Floyd and the
like the BLM movement.
The Black Lives Matter protests. I was also, there'd been Claire Fox, Baroness Fox had written was part of an open letter, I think in The Spectator, and there was an email and lots of people replied to that. There were mums mainly who were very concerned that they'd said the kids are just going back to school after lockdown. As far as they knew, their whole lives had been colour doesn't matter, you just go and you treat people, and whether they're good people or whether they're nice to you, etc, etc. And the kids were suddenly coming back home being told, or having homework sheets saying, you must see colour, how many black friends have you got? And it was like a real shock, and they did not know how to deal with it. Because they were white, they were very, very scared of being labelled racist, because quite rightly, nobody wants to be seen. No one who wants to be on respectable opinion wants to be seen as a racist, right? And I just, that was an awful, awful situation. And then I knew from my academic work, because I think in 2017 I finished my PhD, which I did at Cambridge. And while I was at Cambridge, I also stood for the Brexit Party, which went down really well.
Right. So, I'm guessing you voted for Brexit?
Yes, of course, yes. Yeah. I say, of course, because for me, democracy is so important. That links back to my dad and my upbringing, that he really stressed.
So your reason surely wasn't migration?
No, it wasn't. And I know migration is really important, but I think it's very. I didn't believe all the kind of the Remainer caricatures for 1 minute. That we were, people who wanted to leave were nostalgic for the empire, etc., etc. If anything, it's like the Leave vote was more radical. It was leaving an institutional European empire project, really. But when I was canvassing to stand for the Brexit Party, migration, immigrants did come up a lot, and this was from people who were immigrants themselves, right? And it links into what you're saying about the migrant protests. It's not the colour or the fact that they're foreign or migrants. It's one of the key things of British culture, if you like, is the real strong sense of fairness. It's like we are fair, we're so fair, we queue up at the bus stop and we queue up everywhere, right? That's, which doesn't happen in quite a lot of other countries as it happens. And that's even in Europe too. So it's that sense of fairness. And also I was very struck by one of the mums, I think, at the Epping migrant protest who was on the radio. And she was being interviewed and she said it's not left and it's not right, it's about safety.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think when she said it's about safety, she meant the kind of safetyism of the activists who want protected safe spaces all the time. I think what she was alluding to, and I could be wrong, I don't want to, sort of claim I have any insight into her mind, but it seems to me that these mums are not kind of weaklings. They're quite strident and strong, which is lovely to see. And I think that thing of safety, it's kind of, think of it as security. We cannot feel secure, and the reason we cannot feel secure is visible through the presence of illegal immigration. But behind that, it's the fact that we can't trust the authorities who are meant to be dealing with it, who are meant to be taking responsibility, the political leaders who are meant to listen to us, the administrative state that is meant to listen to the government. And every day we're just finding out that the civil service does whatever it likes, whatever the government ministers say. We know it in our everyday experience. Even trying to get a GP appointment can feel like a battle sometimes.
Trying to get through the phone lines at 8 a.m.
Yeah. So it's just like, this just leads to, I think, a sort of slow and inarticulate sense of almost like existential insecurity. And no one wants to live like that.
No
one wants to live like that.
So was that the moment that crystallised you to say, right, I'm going to write this piece?
Sorry, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. That's kind of come a bit later. The writing the piece was simply to make that stand, that to question,
right,
to question anti-racist shibboleths was not a racist thing itself. That if you believe in democracy, if you believe in freedom of speech, if you believe in a notion of kind of moral equality, then you do not section off people into you're a moral baddie because of what your government did 200 years ago, and you are a moral goodie because of what another government did to your country 200 years ago. It's just totally illogical.
No.
It's not supported by empirical evidence at all. And the fact that the people making these arguments cannot support it makes them all the more dangerous, because it means they will then be very, very vicious and authoritarian to ensure their viewpoint wins. They can't persuade people.
No, I get that. So they take to other means, don't they? Like character assassinations is a big one, or the cancellations.
Guilt by association.
Guilt by association. I've had a bit of that myself. A lot of people that come to talk on here, on Lament, currently have been from Reform, which is fine. I'll talk to anyone. That's my goal. But the amount of people that have said, well, you only speak to right wing, well, the only people saying yes at the minute. Surely when more people talk, you can get the message out and provide some balance. This
whole right wing, left wing thing, I think it's just really only a way for people who are scared of popular opinion, who are scared of common sense. It's like they want to create a safety cordon.
It does seem like a lot of people have been, I think the word's infantilised.
Yeah.
So when you wrote the piece, did that come with any risks to you personally or professionally?
Not as much as standing for the Brexit Party.
Was that more risky, was it? Did you lose friends?
Yes.
That was definitely a knife through the cake for a lot of people. It definitely divided people up, Brexit.
It was the moment when I realised that I was growing, I was coming to that conclusion anyway. The further I was getting into my PhD studies, the more I was realising that I could not work in academia, because everything that I was finding out was showing me how, at that point, it was just quite an academic, intellectually corrupt it was in terms
really?
of... Yeah. And of course and then subsequent to that, I realised it's not just an intellectual corruption, it's a political and moral and kind of everything, really.
I remember when I was studying nursing. Granted, I didn't finish my nursing course. I have a needle phobia, so I should have thought about that better.
Oh, dear.
But I remember on campus I used to see lots of like join the Communist Party posters and things like that, or the Socialist Party. I remember saying to a friend of mine, I don't see any join the fascist posters. And he was like, well, we can't do that. And there's me thinking, because I like history, and there's me thinking, well, communism killed more people. But for some reason that's celebrated, or seems to be at the minute, on campus, where it's supposed to be a granted freedom of ideas. Sorry, I think I'm getting off slightly now. But yeah, I understand what you mean, the academia side.
So, I mean, that was kind of what, there was that kind of raw, but also just personally, I was just thinking, everything that these people, this ideology being espoused, but through equity, diversity and inclusion groups within schools, through new posts being made in businesses and corporations, through posters in shops, everywhere.
I think it's big in the NHS as well, isn't it?
It's very big. That's one of the major institutions that's promulgating it, really, since 2010. I thought none of this makes sense. You know, for this to make sense, I would have to rewrite my own life story. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I would have to think my dad was a fool. I would have to think, my parents were idiots. I would have to think, my friends were acting in bad faith when they were friends with, I just thought, I'm not doing this, I'm just not doing it. Nobody should be asked to do this on the word of who? On the word of these activists spouting off. No way, absolutely no way. So it was that kind of, defensive anger, if you like, that sparked that was the prompt for that. But having made that, having written that, it kind of opened a bit of a floodgate that then became Don't Divide Us.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I've thought more and a bit more deeply and read a bit more and kind of understood more about what is happening, not just in terms of immigration and just in terms of racism, but more broadly in terms of philosophical eras, political times, etc.
Okay, so moving on from there slightly.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about your piece, we've talked a bit about racism and things like that. We both have mentioned activism. So what do you think of the activism around the Palestine and Gaza situation and Israel situation?
Well, I have to say I hate it.
Right, here which aspect?
Well, politically I disagree. Politically I support Israel. I support Israel because it's the only democracy in that area. I think the history of the region is probably contestable at certain points, but that's not the reason. This isn't happening because of history.
No.
This is what is happening, the demonstrations every week, the growing and very worrying anti-Semitism that we're seeing, casual anti-Semitism without people even realising it. The double standards applied to Israel. No other country has that kind of scrutiny or criticism or double standards applied to it. To me, it's a result of several things converging. But I suppose from the area of life that I know best, it's a result of historical ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Children, teenagers, graduates and universities are not taught proper history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of ethical, philosophical rejection of the idea of objectivity or truth, which then leaves a vacuum into which truth then becomes not what is provable through logic or through empirical evidence. Truth becomes what is said most emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the epistemology of emotions, if you like. And it's who can, and that keys in with a kind of cultural validation of victimhood.
Right.
If you're, a victim, then everything has to bend towards uplifting you.
Mm-hmm.
On very little evidence that you actually are a victim. So to me, it's a combination of those things, and then you also have added into that mix the sheer political opportunism of largely the Labour Party in having cultivated block votes amongst the most reactionary sections of the Muslim communities in Britain. I mean, just the very word communities, I just think we should stop using the word communities.
Shouldn't we just be the British community?
Yeah, exactly. There should just be one community. It's a British community, and then you'll have groups of, you know, people of this religion or that religion. But, you know, you're representing a region, a political area. You are representing British interest, right? Not Pakistan's or not Palestine's.
There was I think, I'm sure a fact checker will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure there was a Labour politician who wanted to build an airport in Pakistan. But I don't understand how that's the benefit to his constituents.
Well, you know, I mean, this is their argument would be that he's been voted in by people locally. Most of the people that voted him locally are Pakistani. They have to go back for holidays or whatever to see family, and they are inconvenienced by not having an airport wherever it is they wanted it. But that is, you know, that's the end. That's the kind of communalist result. Not communist, communalist.
As we're talking about the Labour Party, communism.
Communalist logical endpoint of multiculturalism. Really, it's, you know, no, I'm sorry, no, it's not. You know, you have come to Britain. If you're inconvenienced because you haven't got an airport when you go back to see your family, you know, basically tough.
Go live closer to an airport.
Yeah, you know, it's just I just find it shocking. I can't imagine any other. I mean, I lived in Spain for quite a few years when I was younger, and it never occurred to me to demand things of the Spanish government. You know, that I would, you know, I never expected to vote in Spanish elections, for example, when I was without citizenship, or wouldn't have expected to get access to their healthcare, etc.
So, as we're talking about politics and things like that, what do you think of the 14 years the Conservatives are in power? Or should I say, what do you think of the Conservatives? They were in power for 14 years.
I just felt a little bit hopeful when Boris was elected, but when he was talking about getting Brexit done. But, I mean, they squandered the opportunity. They had it was a historical, real failure. They did not make good on what they had a mandate. They had a mandate from people who had never voted Conservatives in their lives, whose parents and grandparents had probably never voted Conservative. What they could have done with that was some courage and some political imagination. Would probably change the course of history. We wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. So, bitterly disappointed in that Conservative Party.
Do you suspect that's lack of political will, which I've heard people say about Keir Starmer at the moment, or do you think it is more what you referenced earlier, the civil service blocking things?
I think it's a combination. I think but at the end of the day, the buck will stop at a lack of will and a lack of courage and a lack of political imagination. But that said, up today, I think there are individuals within the Conservative Party who I've got a lot of time for. I think Katie Lamb has been excellent on holding the government to account on the national inquiry for the child rape grooming gangs, for example. Claire Coutinho is very, very good on net zero as well. And, you know, and I have to say, it was Kemi Badenoch, for all, you know, I know she comes for a lot of criticism from more right wing of her party, but in terms of the culture war, in terms, you know, she commissioned the CRED report, the Commission for Racial and Ethnic Disparities, without which a lot of the pushback, I think a lot of the pushback owes a lot to the breakthrough that made. It's the one single point that statistical disparities do not prove racism. from that one single point, and some examples, there's flowed an awful lot of subsequent research and work in academia and beyond academia that's challenging that idea. You don't, you're a black shop assistant, you're a white shop assistant, you don't get equal pay with racism. Never mind the hours you work or when you started or anything like that.
Maternity, paternity,
exactly.
Annual leave, all
exactly.
these things that just seem to be forgotten about.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the Conservatives. Is there anyone in Labour that you've got time for? I have reached out to the Labour Party for our local constituents, and I'm not getting any responses.
I like Maurice Glasman.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anyone. I mean, there may well be individuals who. I mean, I think West Streeting might have said one or two things I'd quite like, but I think on the whole, the Labour Party is the party that is most entrenched in the whole failed political paradigm of the past, or it is also the most technocratic of the parties, because it was Blair that introduced this whole new form of government, new form of ruling at arm's length, indirectly through creating the quangos,
and they seem to be bringing in more and more tech to monitor everything as well.
Exactly.
I mean, I grew up and security cameras were a thing, but they're everywhere now, and now they're doing vans to monitor people's faces. We're talking a couple of days after Notting Hill Carnival. They were praising that up on the radio today with facial recognition's helped us track people down. It's like, I know it's overused, but it's almost like an Orwellian nightmare.
They've got
they're just monitoring
things,
everything you do. I'm pretty sure if I was to pass wind somewhere, they would know about it.
But it's just this. I think it arises from their deep existential insecurity that they no longer. Throughout the 20th century, the Labour Party had institutional and organisational roots with the working class, mainly through the unions, but through other kinds of bodies as well. With all that having gone, they no longer have those forms of connection, and they no longer even have a vision of what to do. They no longer have a growing economy of productivity through which some things could be cushioned and give them a bit of leeway. They haven't got any of those things. So they're absolutely like rabbits in a headlight. The only thing that they can do to any problem is more control, more authoritarianism, more watching, more monitoring, more sanctions. Never what is going on, we need to get to grips with this, let's think calmly, rationally, I mean, admittedly, no government is helped by a media that's screeching all the time. I mean, I felt that during COVID. I just thought with the headlines that media were coming out, how could any minister think calmly for 1 second? And we do need some deeper, better thinking from our political class, whichever party they come from.
So I saw recently that Keir Starmer's approval rating is through the floor and then some.
Yeah.
Do you think Angela Rayner is sharpening the knife to put in his back?
She could be. Do you know, honestly, I'm sorry, Dean, but I'm so bored by I do not follow the ins and outs of the Labour Party. I don't follow much of the party politics. I wouldn't be surprised.
No.
She's got a certain bit of a personality that Starmer hasn't got. But I think we're at a state in British political life where having a bit of a personality ain't going to get you very far. Really. It's just, we want more. We want and deserve more than that.
So, what's the future hold for you now?
Well, I'm getting on. Energy levels are not what they once were. Now, we've brought out this latest report on the Equality Act, and it's. I'm not usually one to blow our own trumpet, but it's our best report yet. We have looked at over 5,000 employment tribunal cases that have been brought on grounds of racism. of race discrimination, and we were expecting to find the judiciary totally captured. In actual fact, it isn't. In actual fact, because there's only 5% of those cases that are upheld from our sample.
Yeah.
So either that means the employment judges are Ku Klux Klan members,
Right.
or it means there's something else going on here. And that was what we were really interested in. The subtitle of our report is, you know, the breakdown of workplace culture, of informal civility in workplace culture, which links into what you were saying about being monitored all the time.
Yeah.
You know, if you now work in a place where everything is monitored, and you work in a situation where you're likely to have a multi-ethnic, if you're in a city, you like to have a multi-ethnic workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, I was a teacher for many years, and it would be like, oh, Friday, going to come down the pub, Alka, you know, after work. You can't even ask that question, or, you know, you think, if it's a Muslim person, would they be offended?
And then if you don't ask them...
And if you don't ask them, you know, I mean, that's such... How can you know, people think about improving the British economy or raising productivity, and you think of energy costs, or you think of government regulation, or you think of competitiveness with China or America or something. You never stop to think about, well, the actual source of productivity are humans.
Mm-hmm.
Right? British workers here in Britain, up and down the country, what is their workplace experience like? And what our report is indicating is that there are important structural problems emerging, but none of them are to do with racism, right? They're to do with zero-hour contracts, outsourcing to agency workers, introducing new forms of management that leaves everybody confused and unclear as to who to report to, ill-worked-out complaints procedures, promotion through diktat rather than through merit. All of those things are making work a very different experience to what, you know, even in one generation, you know, when I was younger, it would be very different. So what we want to do with this report is try and, I think it has already, it was very well received in the press, not just by the usual suspects, but by a law publication and a human resources publication, and I've been speaking to people in both those fields of work, and there is an appetite to question more, review, repeal the Equality Act. We're not advocating repeal straight away, or you know, we're saying certain bits of it should be repealed, but you know, any new legislation should be reviewed within 3 to 5 years. This has been here 15 years, and we've not had a repeal, we've not had a review, right? So there's a basic democratic accountability question, apart from anything else. So, you know, it will be to try and gather more support for that, really, campaign, or I haven't quite got it figured out in my head, but...
No, that makes sense. So, just final thoughts. I appreciate you've given me nearly an hour of your time, so thank you for that.
We've just an hour, nearly?
Nearly, yeah. Well, 38 minutes.
Time flies, yeah.
And the company you keep as well. So we've spoken about the Equality Act briefly. What's your stance, just finally, for the on the ECHR? Should we leave or should we stay?
I think we should start with what we need to do to get back control of our borders. We should start with what we need to do to arrive at a sensible policy on legal immigration, on asylum seekers and refugees, all of which are distinct categories, and I wish we could just arrive at least an agreement on which categories to use. And then if we can't do any of those things because of the ECHR, which it looks very likely because of the law, but that part of the judiciary I think is probably much more aligned closer to activist pressures. If we need to leave, then we should leave.
Okay, great way to finish. Dr. Cuthbert, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.